Hello. This tutorial is going to walk through all of the steps necessary to create the I-cord edge for the Brilliance mystery knit-along that the blanket, the shawl, the symmetrical blanket, the symmetrical shawl. If you're doing the I-cord edges and not the seed stitch edges, this will walk through each of the steps required to get that started. So what you're going for is this lovely kind of a tubular rolled edge that's a little bit thicker than the rest of the fabric that is continuous. If you set it up correctly, it's not even going to be noticeable where you actually started the I-cord, because it's going to just look like a continuous piece of edging that goes all the way around. So a couple of things before I get started. First of all, I'm not a professional videographer. This is not a professional setup, so I apologize in advance that I'm going to say I'm probably going to say okay with a question mark at the end a bunch of times, because the teacher in me can't seem to stop doing that. And I hope the lighting is adequate. I'm going to try to keep my hands in the frame as much as I possibly can, but because I can't actually look at what I'm doing and look at the camera, there may be times where I drift, and I'm really going to try not to do that. So I apologize in advance if there's something that's not perfectly easy to see. Because this is a longer video, I am going to put down in the video description, and when I post this on Ravelry, I will include links or timestamps for you so that you can just skip to the part of the video that you want to watch and not have to watch through me doing the same thing over and over again. But I am going to go ahead and work the steps. I'm going to work a lot of what you would do when you're doing this for those who would just like to be able to work along with somebody. So there will be timestamps that you can skip to. So I'm going to demonstrate the cast on for the to start out with. I'm going to do the Judy's Improved Magic cast on, just the same way that Shandy does it in her video. Hers is much better. Go watch hers. But I am going to do the cast on. There will be, at the end of the video, so it will be in the timestamps, there will be a link to the, I will do the provisional cast on. I'll do that at the end, so you can see how to do that if you'd prefer to do that. I'm going to make several, I'm going to make some I-cord so that you can just follow along with those steps over and over and over again if you want. I'm going to show how to pick up the stitches, which is the step 3, I think. Yeah, so step 3 of the setup, and then show how to join with the stitches that you make at the beginning to create the continuous loop. So all of that, if you want to skip to the part you want to see, go ahead, and there are a couple other things I'm going to talk about throughout, so I will also put timestamps for those things. All right, let's get started. So I have a circular needle or a circular setup here. My cord is actually just for a 24-inch setup. I've got 4-inch needles on. This is basically 16 inches of cord. And I will explain why I'm using a shorter cord than the instructions call for, or the pattern calls for. You can use a longer cord. You'll see as I go along why I'm using why it's not going to be it's not going to really matter what size your cord is at this point. So let's get started. So to do the cast on, the improved Judy's Magic cast on, you want to set up kind of like you're doing like a long tail cast on or something like that. But instead of having the tail coming from the side that's closest to you and the working yarn coming from further away from you, you actually want that reverse. So you do want the tail coming over your index finger and the working yarn coming over your thumb. And you just want to leave, you don't need a whole lot because it doesn't take a lot of yarn to cast on 5 stitches to each needle. But you do want to leave long enough so that you have a tail that you can weave in at the end. Okay. You want your needles to be held parallel, and your top needle is the needle that's further away from you. Your bottom needle is the needle that's closer to you. And you're just going to, as you can see, I've got my yarn kind of cinched down here with my pinky and my ring finger. And then it's just coming around. So here's my tail coming up over my index finger, coming around to the working yarn, which is coming over my thumb. I'm kind of cinching everything down here, holding it against my palm. And I am going to take my top needle, and so I'm going to take both needles, and I'm actually going to insert it around the yarn. So my top needle is above the yarn, my bottom needle is below the yarn, and I'm just going toward my hand, so to the left. I'm going to push my top needle down, so everything's going to kind of rotate down toward my lap, and then I'm going to rotate it around toward my chest, and then come back to the middle. So this is kind of the rest position. This is the start position or something like that. You basically want, after you make each stitch, this is the position you want your needles to return to. So as you see, I have one stitch on my top needle, and to make the stitch on my bottom needle, the first stitch on my bottom needle, I'm going to rotate both of my needles away from me and over the top of the yarn. And then that bottom needle, so the needle closer to me, is going to scoop under that yarn going around my index finger, and then I'm going to come back to start. So there's my first stitch on my bottom needle. The next stitch on my top needle, I'm going to rotate both needles toward me over the top of the thumb yarn, and then I'm going to let that yarn go in between the needles and bring the needles further toward my chest and up toward my face, and then back to that starting position again. So now I have 2 stitches on my top needle. Next stitch on my bottom needle, again, I'm going to swing away and over, and then down and scoop a loop onto the bottom needle. So let that yarn come between the 2 needles, over the bottom, and back to the center. Next stitch goes on my top needle, so I'm going to swing both needles toward me and over the top of that yarn, and then it's going to come down between them and over the top needle. So the needles are going to come toward my chest and up toward my face, and then back to the center. Next stitch goes on the bottom needle, so this go away, swing away and over, come down, scoop a loop onto the bottom, back to the center, bring the needles toward me, over that yarn, let it come between and over the top of that, the top needle, come up toward my face and back to the middle. Swing away, over that, scoop underneath with the bottom needle, and back to the center, toward me and over that yarn, let it come between them and over the top of the top needle, up toward my face, and then back to center. And I need just one more stitch on my bottom needle, so swing away, over the top, scoop underneath with the bottom needle, and back to center. So there's your 5 stitches on both needles. To finish this, I'm just going to twist my hand holding the yarn so that my index finger comes and points toward my belly button, and my thumb moves away from me, and that's just going to twist the tail up underneath. I've got a pretty long tail there. It's longer than I needed. And then I'm just going to cinch underneath, so I'm kind of holding everything in place, and I'm going to turn my entire setup so that my needles are pointing to the right. So I have my tail coming from the top, and now my needles have switched position. My top needle is the one that we're going to be working the stitches on, and the stitches on the bottom needle are the ones that we're not working right now. So I'm just going to cinch this tail here, and I'm going to push the top needle in so that I can start working those stitches, and then I'm going to pull the bottom needle so that those stitches slide onto the cable. And I'm going to, so this is now the step 2, and I'm going to work row 1. So first stitch is knit, Bring the yarn between the needles to the front, slip one, yarn to the back between the needles, knit one, yarn to the front between the needles, slip one, yarn to the back between the needles, knit one. All right, at this point everything is secure, so I can let go of that tail and turn my work and work row 2. When you turn, you want to be sure that you're not catching, not ending up with the yarn between the cables. It's just going to be harder to work. So you want to make sure when the yarn is in front, the cable is in back and not going around the yarn. So row 2, slip the first stitch. We're always slipping purlwise. Yarn between the needles to the back, knit. Yarn between the needles to the front, slip. Yarn to the needles, or yarn between the needles to the back, knit. Oops. Sorry, this stitch is got something caught really quick. Okay, knit. And yarn between the needles to the front and slip. And that completes row 2. Now, even though we worked 2 rows, we actually only created 1 new row of knitting because we have 5 stitches on here, but we're only working on the front. We're only working the odd numbered stitches, 1, 3, and 5. And on the back, we're working stitches 2 and 4. So we do get a little bit more height than a regular row because we're slipping the yarn. We're moving the yarn around the stitches that we're slipping. So that helps lift them up and that makes them a little bit taller than they would normally be if we were just working rows and slipping the yarn across the back or something like that. All right, so let's repeat that one more time. Let me get my tail out of the way here, my really long tail. Okay, so row 1, knit 1, yarn front, slip 1, oops, yarn back, knit 1, yarn front, slip 1, yarn back, knit 1, turn, row 2, I've got my yarn in the front, so I want to make sure my cable is behind it, slip 1, yarn back, knit 1, yarn front, slip 1, yarn back, knit 1, yarn front, slip 1. Okay. Now, at this point, you can continue working those rows, and I am going to work more rows, but I'm actually going to show you what I do when I am working this, because whether you have a short cord like I have, or you have a long cord, so let me show you, I've got a longer piece here on a longer cord. Whether you have a short cord or a long cord, working with those stitches that are sitting on the cord and trying to work the next row, you're still going to be fighting your cable. You're going to have to reposition your cable every single time. You can see right now my cable wants to twist those stitches around in order to work the next row. So I could work the next row, but because the stitches that are just resting, we're not working these until we get all of our I-cord on and then pick up all the stitches across. We're not working these for a very long time, okay? So instead of leaving these on the cable and trying to fight with them, and trying to fight to keep the cable straight and get the needle where it needs to be, what I actually do, so you have a couple of options. You can get a piece of waste yarn on a tapestry needle and slip each of those stitches onto just a piece of waste yarn. Okay, that's one way to kind of, and you can kind of tie it up so it's out of the way, just make it a little, a little piece that's just dangling there that's not going to get in your way. So that's one option. What I like to do is another option, which is I have just a small, this is a short cable. This is 8 inches of cable that would make a 16-inch circular set if I put needles on either end. And this is probably not the safest way to switch your to slide your stitches over, but I actually just kind of butt them into the tip of the needle. I take that end that's open, so I have an open end, and then I actually have a cable connector on the other end. So I butt that in there. I slide those stitches down until I can feel the connector coming out on the other side, so I know that all those stitches are on the connector. And then I can just pull my needle out and I can slide those onto the cable, and then I can use my connector to close my cable up. And then my stitches can just kind of hang, not binding up my needle or my cable at all. The other thing I do is I begin to work the rest of the stitches with a double pointed needle, one double pointed needle and my cable needle, rather than using both sides. So you could work it however you want. It's just, this is the way that works the easiest for me. So work the way that's easiest for you. All right, so at this point, I want to kind of talk about reading your stitches, because when you're working this edge, you're going to come across this edge for the rest of the project, and you want to make sure that you're always working the correct side so that your I-cord looks nice. If you work the opposite side from where it's supposed to be worked, it will show. So you always want to pay attention to where your tail is, because your tail is going to tell you which side you're on. When your tail is in the back, the first stitch is knit. Okay, when the tail is in the back, the first stitch is knit. And so when you're doing this, it's either knit, slip, knit, or slip, knit, slip, knit, slip. So if you're starting with a knit, you're going to be knitting every other stitch. If you're starting with a slip, you're going to be slipping every other stitch. So obviously you're slipping or knitting, but when the tail is in the back, you begin with a knit. So knit one, yarn front, slip one, yarn back, knit one, yarn front, slip one, yarn back, knit one. All right, so now we have, that's our right side row that we just worked. When I get to the end of a right side row, I always want to give my stitches a little tug, and that just kind of helps keep them, that kind of helps even out the stitches. So I'm going to turn my work, and then, like I said, I use, I always work the wrong side row on the cable needle, because that helps me remember to pick up beginning on the right. So when I pick up stitches, I do need my cable needle. I need to use my circular needle to pick up the stitches. So if I always work the wrong side row with my circular needle, then I have the correct needle to begin picking up stitches when I get there. That's all. That's how my brain works. So again, do what works best for you. Don't do what I'm doing because I'm doing it. Do whatever you're doing because it works for you. We're on a wrong side row. My yarn is in front, which means the first stitch is slipped. Yarn in front, slip the first stitch. Yarn back, knit. Yarn front, slip. Yarn back, knit. Yarn front, slip. Turn. My yarn is in back. That means I'm on a right side row, and the first stitch is knit. Knit one, yarn front, slip one, yarn back, knit one, yarn front, slip one, yarn back, knit one. I do tug, turn, My yarn is in front. The first stitch is slipped. Slip 1, yarn back, knit 1, yarn front, slip 1, yarn back, knit 1, yarn front, slip 1, turn. My yarn is in back. The first stitch is going to be knit. Knit 1, yarn front, slip 1, yarn back, knit 1, yarn front, slip 1, yarn back, knit 1. Give it a little tug, turn. My yarn is in front, so the first stitch is going to be slipped. Slip 1, yarn back, knit 1, yarn front, slip 1, yarn back, knit 1, yarn front, slip 1, turn. I'll do one more set. My yarn is in back. The first stitch is going to be knit. Knit 1, yarn front, slip, yarn back, knit, yarn front, slip, yarn back, knit, tug, and turn. My yarn is in front, so the first stitch is a slip. Oops, slip my needle out. Slip 1, yarn back, knit, yarn front, slip, yarn back, knit, yarn front, slip. You're just going to continue those steps over and over and over until you have the number of stitches along the edge of your I-cord that you need to start the next step. So rather than knitting 200 and however many it is, or 300 however many it is, I am going to pick up, I have a, let's see here, move things, let's see. Okay. So here is my longer piece of I-cord that I've already made that I'm just going to use to demonstrate how to pick up the stitches. And I actually need my needle, my circular needle from my other set here. Okay. So this is the next step. I'm going to demonstrate how to pick up the stitches along the edge of the I-cord. And before we get to that, I'm actually going to, so let's see, I have sorry, let me see here. Yes, okay. So my current row is missing a stitch. So let me back up here a little bit. All right. Excuse me while I get this set up here. All right, so that one's knit, yarn front, slip, yarn back, knit. All right. So I have just finished working a right side row on my little longer piece of I-cord here. So I'm going to do the wrong side row, which begins with the slip, yarn back and knit, yarn front and slip, yarn back and knit, yarn front and slip. And I'll get rid of my double pointed needle now because I'm ready to pick up some stitches off of the I-cord. So let me try zooming in just a bit and really hoping I don't go out of frame here. All right, so I just wanted to show you when you go to pick up the stitches. So I've got my needle is pointing straight up here because I want to look at this stitch that's going around the needle right here. And I want to find the stitches that are in line with that. The same stitches that are in that line leading up to the stitch on the needle. Because what I don't want to do when I go to pick up stitches is roll to the front and pick up in front of that. And I don't want to roll to the back and pick up behind that, because that's going to make the edge cord not straight. And let me see if I can grab this without. So you want your edge stitches to all come out of the same. So this is where I've picked up stitches along this edge right here. And you want to make sure that you are picking up along that same line so the cord is not twisting one way or the other as you're picking up stitches, if that makes sense. So that's kind of the first thing. The second thing I wanted to show you is you want to make sure when you're picking up stitches, you're going to bring your needle tip is going to go in to the, you're going to go in underneath both legs of the stitch in the row that you're picking up from back to front. So you want to go under this leg and under this leg, and then you're going to wrap the yarn and you're going to pull it through to the back here when you go to pick up those stitches. So, oh, one more thing. Get my needle back. You also want to, before you pick up stitches, it's really, really, really important that you count. What you don't want to do is not count this accurately, this row. You want to make sure you have the exact number of stitches specified in this row before you start picking up stitches. Because if you're short, or you're long, if you have too many stitches or too few stitches, it's not going to be correctable on when you get to the other end. So if you're missing a couple of stitches, so let's say you're supposed to pick up 20. You're not, but let's just say for the sake of argument, you're supposed to pick up 20. You're supposed to skip 2 on this end and skip 2 on this end. If you get all the way down here and you've skipped 2 and you pick up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, and your 20th stitch that you're picking up is right next to your I-cord, there is a way to fix that, which is to work those 2 rows over here 2 more times. So you're going to create 2 rows after that picked up stitch. But if you have a lot too few, or if you get to here and you're only at 18 and you need 2 more to pick up, you need to pick up 2 more stitches, you can't add rows and then pick up more stitches into the I-cord because it's not going to look right. So you could add you could add the 2 rows that are missing, the 2 gap rows that are at the end, but you can't add rows that are going to need a stitch picked up in them. Sorry, realized I was moving out of frame again. Same thing if you have too many stitches. You're going to end up with a gap where the I-cord is, and you're not going to be able to pull out the I-cord from this end, if that makes sense. So it's like if you had too many stitches on one end, you could reduce them by backing out several rows of I-cord. But you can't do that once you've picked up the stitches because your working yarn is no longer in the cord. So it's really, 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 really important. I would suggest you use stitch markers for you know, every 25 or every 50, whatever you need to do to make sure you have the exact right count. I would count twice, pick up once. Make sure that you have the correct number. So when you're counting, the stitch around the needle does not count. All right, so this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Whoop. So when you do that, when you lose count because you slipped, start over. Don't just assume, I think it was that stitch, because you will regret it. I'm possibly speaking from experience. Okay, so not the stitch around the needle. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I'm going to stick that in there so I can kind of move this a little bit. 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. Do that again. 17, whoops, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, and then I have my stitch that's on the other cable. So I have 22 stitches in this short cord here, which means if I'm going to skip 2 on this end and I'm going to skip 2 on this end, I need to pick up 18 stitches. So 22 minus 2, 20, and then minus another 2, 18. So I'm going to pull my little swatch back out here to show you why we're doing that. Okay, the I-cord has to turn the corner. If you have your I-cord this is kind of the I-cord that I've been making, all right? So it started here, and it's going this way, and I'm picking up all the way across here to pick up the edge stitches over here. So I've got edge stitches here and edge stitches here, and it has to turn the corner, and we're going to have 2 rows right there to give it room to do that. Does that make sense? So if I don't leave those 2 rows, this corner is going to bunch up really badly, and it's not going to look nice. So you want to make sure you leave those 2 extra rows. Okay, so now that we're 30 minutes into this video, we are going to start picking up stitches. So I'm going to make sure I am on, let's see, sorry, everything's going to get messed up here, so I want to try to keep this zoomed in because it's easier for you to see what I'm doing if it's zoomed in, but I also want to make sure that I can see what I'm doing and I don't go out of frame. So I am on my wrong side. I have just worked a wrong side row, which means my yarn is coming from not the last stitch, but the stitch before the last on the needle. Right. I'm going to skip the first row below that, the second row below that, and I'm going to bring my needle from back to front under both legs of the third row from the needle. I'm going to wrap my yarn around, and I'm going to pull it through the stitch. And I want to do my absolute best not to catch any, so I want to basically make sure every time I pick up a stitch that my yarn is loose, like I've not picked up, I've not split the stitches that I've gone through, and I've not split the yarn that I pulled through. So I'm going to make sure that piece of yarn is all the way around the needle in the correct way. Okay, so I'm actually going to take that out, and I'm going to do what I should have done, which is add your stitch marker. So this is the stitch marker that's designating here are the edge stitches, and now I'm adding body stitches. Okay, so I've picked up my first body stitch there, and I'm just going to go down the line each row. I'm going to go underneath both legs of the next stitch, so I'm going to make sure I'm under this leg, wrap the yarn, pull through. Check to make sure it's loose. It's 2. Under the next 2 legs, right there. So you can kind of see, I hope, the hole. There's a hole. I've gone under both legs and not through them or missed one. Wrap, pull through to the back, make sure that it's loose. 3, under both legs, check for that hole, wrap, pull through, make sure that it's loose. And I'm just going to continue this all the way down the line until I have the number of stitches that I need to pick up, which in my case is 18. So I've got 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, check, yep, 9, 10, 11, that stitch is going to be a pill. All right, front leg, 1 leg, 2 leg, there we go. I think that's 12, 5, 10, 12. All right. 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, and 18. And again, we want this gap of the 2 stitches at the end right there. And now it is time to put the 5 stitches that we made at the very beginning, the other 5 stitches, onto the needle. So to do that, I'm going to unscrew my cable here. And you want to make sure that these stitches go on the correct orientation. And I'm actually, because they have to be worked, instead of putting them on the needle where I just picked up the stitches, I'm actually going to bring my other needle around. I'm going to butt that tip back into the end of the cable, and I'm going to slide them onto my needle, like so. So if you put them on waste yarn or something like that, you just want, so you can put them on this needle, they're just going to need to get slipped purl-wise to the opposite needle because you need to work them. So now I'm ready to work my edge stitches, the ones that I created at the very beginning. And because I'm on a wrong side row, I'm going to work it exactly the same as the stitches at the beginning of this row, which was the with the yarn in front. You start with the yarn in the front on the wrong side, which means the first stitch is slip. I'm going to go ahead and put my other stitch marker on, so to separate the edge stitches from the body stitches. Slip the first stitch, yarn back, knit, yarn front, slip, yarn back, knit, yarn front, slip. And now I have both sides of my I-cord on the needles, on the needle, and I'm ready to start working my actual pattern onto the stitches. Let's see, I don't know that you need me to actually begin working that, but I will work the first 2 rows of the pattern just to kind of give you an idea of what that looks like. You're, again, welcome to skip if that's not something you need. So I'm on a right side row. The first stitch is going to be knit, yarn front, slip, yarn back, knit, yarn front, slip, yarn back, knit, slip my stitch marker. The first row of clue 1 is just knit 1, purl 1 all the way across. So we'll do that. Knit, purl, 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 knit, purl. Slip my stitch marker. Again, I'm on a right side, so first stitch is knit, slip 1 with yarn in front, knit, slip 1 with yarn in front, knit. All right, so just kind of slide that onto the cable and give you an idea of what you're looking for. There's our body row with the edge stitches coming all the way around. And as you begin to work up, this will begin to look even more square as you work body rows up. It will square off even more. Okay, so let's see. The next thing I wanted to do was, I know that some people had a question about why are you making I-cord this way? So normal I-cord is worked. Let's see if I can so maybe see if I can find my end in here. I got an end over here. All right, so normal I-cord is worked. This is not the cast on that you'd use, but so if you had normal I-cord is three stitches wide. Okay, that's the typical I-cord that you make. So if you're making a 5-stitch I-cord and working it the traditional way, you would begin by making sure your yarn is all the way to the wrong end of the stitches. So you're going to be pulling this yarn all the way across the back and then knitting all 5 or however many you're working. So you would knit 2, 3, 4, 5, and then you would either slip them back to the needle that you just worked off of, or if you were using a DPN or a cable needle, you'd slide them to the other side, and then you'd pull that yarn across the back and knit again the next row. Okay, so that's how I-cord is typically made, is that you just knit across all the stitches and then pull the yarn across the back. And so instead of turning and working another row, you're just working across the front over and over and over. Okay, I hope that makes sense. I'm not going to work a bunch of it because that's not relevant. So when you work regular I-cord, you get a cord. Okay, so a normal I-cord has, because it has 3 stitches, where you've, make sure this is in frame, where you've knit across the back usually just kind of wraps up. Because I've made a 5-stitch I-cord here, there's actually this little gap down the middle of the back. So where the stitches are not, so you can see these stitches, and then they get wider right here, and then they get narrower. Okay, so that's the first reason that we're not doing traditional I-cord, is because with a 5-stitch cross with that yarn in the back, you're going to get this gap. It's not going to be quite round. 3-stitch I-cord actually makes a really nice round cord. So that's the first reason. The second reason is because traditional I-cord worked that way makes short stitches. So this is I-cord worked the way that it's in the pattern. So I'm going to zoom out just a little tiny bit so you can see the whole thing. Okay, so this is the same number of rows of I-cord. Make sure everything is in the picture here. Okay, so I have worked the same number. There are 20 rows of I-cord on both of these. And you can see that the traditional I-cord, the stitches are shorter. Okay, so it's a smaller, same yarn, same needle size. But because I'm wrapping my yarn around the stitches that I'm slipping, it makes them taller. Okay, it's really, really, really important for this project because you want your I-cord edge stitches to be long enough to accommodate the rows. So you're working 1 row of I-cord, and when I say 1 row, I mean all 5 stitches are getting worked once for 2 rows of knitting. So you're working back and forth, but you're working the 3 stitches on the front and the 2 stitches on the back. So you're going this way, your knitting's going this way, you're working the 3 stitches on the front and wrapping the other 2. And then when your knitting turns around and goes the other way, you're working the 2 stitches on the back and slipping the other 3. And the only way you can get the height needed to accommodate 2 rows of knitting is to work the I-cord the way that it's written, if that makes sense. So this does, so the I-cord that I worked according to the pattern, you can see it rolls around. It is slightly flattened, so you could bunch it up and make it into a cord if you wanted to, but it will lay a little bit flatter on your project. But you don't have that gap that you have on the back of the traditional I-cord, where the yarn is being pulled over. Instead, you have it just rolls all the way around with the same size all the way around. But again, you're getting taller stitches. So there's that. And then the last thing I wanted to do is demonstrate the provisional cast on. And now that I'm thinking about it, I may need to actually do I don't have yarn. Let's see. I thought I was prepared. I wasn't. All right, so here's my waste yarn. Here's my needle. Here is my crochet hook, and then I just need to, pardon my reach, get a little ball of yarn. Also, pardon my rattling. Okay, so yarn, this is going to be thicker. This is a little bit thicker. I don't have a whole lot of extra yarn for demonstration purposes, unfortunately, so, but it may help you see better what I'm doing anyway. So, I have my waste yarn. Let's see, so we'll just start from the beginning. You want a piece of waste yarn. You need a crochet hook about the same size as the needle that you're working with, and then you need your working yarn. To do the provisional cast on, you're going to begin with a slip knot in your waste yarn. And there are a bunch of ways to do a provisional cast on. I've tried the where you make a crochet chain and then you knit into that. I have tried the way that I'm showing you. No matter what you do, the first stitch is going to be a little wonky. The the first stitch that you end up getting back to pick up is going to be a little wonky, and also the getting all the right number of stitches on the provisional cast on so that you have the right number of stitches to pick up to is there's just a couple tricks to it. So the provisional cast on that I am going to show you is where you have your, so I've got my waste yarn on my crochet hook, and then I am going to take my knitting needle and I'm going to kind of place it in front of my crochet hook. So let me make sure everything is in frame here. Okay. And then my crochet hook is going to kind of cross almost perpendicular. Sorry, my cable wants to get in the way. So I am going to take my waste yarn and I'm going to wrap it around, and then I am going to grab it with the hook and I'm going to pull it through that slip knot. My tail wants to get in the way. Right. And then I'm going to bring my yarn back around. Whoops. So you want your yarn come around the needle and then pull through that loop. Around the needle, pull through the loop, 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 and I have the number of stitches I want on here. Now what I do is just chain a few more so that I have something to unzip, and then I pull the yarn through the end, so pull the tail through the end. So that's kind of step one. The next thing I want to do is I'm actually going to slide my chain here that I started, or my stitches that I put on my needle, to the other end so that my slip knot end is down here, and I'm actually going to just put another little slip knot in this end so that it's really clear which end is the slip knot end. Okay. Then I'm going to grab my working yarn and my other needle, and I'm just going to knit a row of stitches, making sure I have a good tail. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So yes, it says 5 in the instructions, but you actually need to pick up number of stitches, and if you put 5 on here, you will be missing a stitch when you get back to it at the very end of making your I-cord. So 6. Okay. Then I'm going to turn my work, and I'm actually going to begin with this row working the I-cord instructions. So because I have to knit this first stitch, it is actually going to trap the waste yarn, which when I get back to it, I'm going to show you when I unzip this, that first stitch is going to be trapped weird. Okay, it's not a problem. You can get around it. What you do not want to do is catch any of your waste yarn in the stitches that you're creating, because you will end up having to cut the yarn apart to get them out. Okay, so row 1 is knit 1, yarn front, slip 1, yarn back, knit 1, yarn front, slip 1, yarn back, knit 1, and then that's the end of the 5 stitches I had to make. Now the reason I made this 6th stitch is so that I could pull the tail through there, so that when I come back I will have 5 stitches to pick up. Okay, that's all. So now you're going to work your 5 stitch I-cord back and forth until you get to having enough stitches to actually pick up stitches. So I'm just going to make that much. Okay, so slip one, it's the wrong side row, knit, slip, knit, slip, turn, knit, slip, knit, slip, knit, turn, wrong side, slip, knit, slip, knit, slip, right side, oops, knit, slip, knit, slip, knit. If you needed more practice on your I-cord, this is the place to watch me do it, because it's going to take me a minute to get to the end here. But maybe if I do it quietly, I can fast forward. Slip, knit, slip, knit, slip. And that's what I'm going to do. I am going to just fast forward through this part. So I'll catch you on the other side. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, so now I'm just gonna pick up a couple of stitches. So I've got, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I'll make one more row. So I can pick up 2 stitches, because 1 stitch is almost ridiculous. Let's see, 1, All right. So normally I would put a stitch marker on, skip 2 rows, and then pick up a stitch in the third, underneath that third set of legs, 1, and under the fourth set of legs, 2, and then it would be time to unzip my provisional cast on and pick up stitches from there. So the first thing I'm going to do is undo this tail that I made, where I pulled the tail through, and I'm going to unzip these stitches. Now, the reason I put the knot in the opposite end is because I needed to be sure I was picking up from the correct end, because this will only unzip one way. Okay, it's like those charcoal bags or like dog food bags where if you pull the string from the right side, you pull out one loop and then you pull it, it will unzip the whole thing. And if you pull it out from the other side, you can't pull anything. So it will only unzip from one side. All right, so I'm going to unzip to my first stitch here. And this is the one that's odd because I had to knit around the crochet cord, so, or the spare. So I'm going to put that on the needle. I'm going to put that loop on the needle, and then I'm going to actually pull my, or attempt to pull my, let's see, here we go, pull my tail out. So this is the weird one. The rest are not weird. But again, it's because I had to knit around the provisional cast on to make that stitch. All right, so I'm going to grab the loop and the tail, and I'm going to pull up, and that's going to show me where my next stitch is. And I'm going to pull that out, and again, grab the loop and tail, pull up, put my needle into that stitch, pull that out, pull in the loop and the tail, put my needle into that stitch, pull out, and then pull up, and I will get that last. So count and make sure. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's my original. See if I have my stitch markers. It would be so much easier. Those are the 2 I cast on. Here are my 5 provisional stitches that I'm picking up. Pull out the waste yarn, and now I've got my 5 stitches back on the cable to begin working. So I would have to slip these to my other needle because they still need to be worked in this row. 2, 3. This one's not oriented correctly, so I'm going to change that. 4. You want the right leg on the front and the left leg on the back, and then 5, and this one is also twisted. Okay, so I would then work the wrong side row, which is where I am. Slip 1, knit 1, slip 1, knit 1, and slip the last stitch. So I got that tail down. So the tail does end up, when you do the provisional cast on, the tail ends up in a bit of a different place than it does when you do the magic cast on, but that's pretty much the only difference. You still get your nice continuous I-cord around that edge, and that's pretty much all there is to it. Let's see, I think that's it. And if you have any questions, or if there's something else that I could demonstrate, or something that I didn't demonstrate well, that you would like something else to be shown, please don't hesitate to ask. I'm more than happy to try to make these. I know they don't look the best and they're not the best quality, but at least you can hopefully see what you need to see. Thanks.